What if China closed its borders, not just to people, but to trade, capital, and data, and the global economy woke up to a shock it was never prepared to absorb? For decades, the world has operated under a silent assumption that China would always be there. Factories running day and night, ports moving endlessly, supply chains stretching invisibly across oceans. The global economy was built on efficiency, interdependence, and trust in uninterrupted flow. But in a world already strained by geopolitical tension, fragile logistics, and expanding digital surveillance, subtle signals begin to emerge from China. A turn inward, a push toward extreme economic sovereignty. At first, markets dismiss it as rhetoric. Another policy shift, another strategic warning. But then, borders close. Trade agreements are suspended. Data flows are restricted. Ships stop moving. Algorithms lose visibility. And within hours, the global economy, what a scenario, becomes real. This is not just a story about one nation stepping back. This is about an alternate economy forming in real time, one where AI-driven systems scramble to replace lost production, where megacorporations race to secure resources, and where governments realize how dependent the modern world truly is. Prices react before people do. Jobs disappear before explanations arrive. And uncertainty spreads faster than any virus ever could. Stay with me until the end of the simulation, because what you're about to discover could change how you see future predictions, globalization, and economic security itself. This isn't science fiction. It's a logical extension of trends already visible: automation, economic nationalism, digital borders, and the silent rise of AI as the backbone of global systems. Maybe this future feels extreme. Maybe it feels impossible. Or maybe it's closer than anyone wants to admit. Because when a single economic engine powers the world, shutting it down doesn't slow the system. It rewrites it. And it's exactly here that this alternate timeline begins to take shape. As this alternate timeline starts to unfold, it's worth pausing for just a moment inside the simulation. If this scenario feels plausible to you, or if one detail already stands out as unsettling, let me know in a short comment. Those signals matter. They show that these questions about global economy, what if scenarios, aren't abstract, but relevant to how we all think about the future. And if this analysis resonates, a simple like quietly tells a system that this kind of deep, speculative economic storytelling deserves to reach more minds exploring alternate economy futures. That small action helps keep these simulations visible in a world flooded with noise. If you choose to subscribe, you're not just following a channel. You're joining an ongoing experiment in future predictions, where AI, megacorporations, governments, and societies collide across alternate timelines. A growing community makes it possible to go deeper, slower, and more honestly into these economic what-if scenarios. Now, back inside the timeline. Because the moment the borders seal, the consequences don't arrive gradually. They cascade. Markets don't wait for explanations. Algorithms don't pause for diplomacy. Within days, the absence of a single node in the global system begins to distort prices, employment, and strategic decisions worldwide. This is where uncertainty becomes measurable. This is where the first real fractures appear. And this is where the early years of this alternate future begin to reveal how fragile or adaptable the modern economic order truly is. In the first years of this alternate timeline, the shock is not theoretical. It's physical, measurable, and immediate. Manufacturing lines across the world fall silent as components stop arriving. Ports slow, then stall. Shipping routes that once moved with algorithmic precision begin to collapse under uncertainty. Inflation surges, not because demand explodes, but because supply simply vanishes. In these early years, the impact reaches ordinary lives faster than policy ever could. Electronics become scarce. Medical equipment is rationed. Entire industries discover that redundancy was an illusion. Millions of jobs connected, directly or indirectly, to supply chains linked to China disappear in waves. At first, it feels temporary, a disruption to be managed, but as months turn into years, the truth becomes unavoidable. The global economy was not diversified. It was optimized, and optimization has no resilience when its core is removed. This realization reshapes decision-making at every level, from households to hedge funds. Now I want to go deeper into this scenario. As the shock persists, governments and central banks move from denial to intervention. Emergency liquidity floods markets. Interest rates are manipulated with precision and desperation. Strategic reserves are unlocked. But policy alone can't rebuild factories or recreate lost decades of industrial capacity. At the same time, megacorporations step into the vacuum. With access to capital, data, and AI-driven forecasting, they begin reconstructing supply chains faster than states ever could. Power shifts quietly, away from elected institutions, and toward entities that can act at machine speed. As the decade unfolds, a reconfiguration takes shape. New economic blocks emerge, defined less by geography and more by technological alignment. Regions that master automation, energy independence, and AI logistics gain leverage. Others fall into dependency, trading sovereignty for access. The old idea of globalization fractures into parallel systems, semi-closed, strategically aligned, and increasingly incompatible with one another. This is not a collapse, but transformation driven by necessity rather than choice. From here, two extreme futures begin to crystallize. In one, an abundance economy forms. Automation scales, production decentralizes, and scarcity fades as AI-driven systems outperform the past. Access expands, and resilience becomes a new efficiency. In the other, concentration dominates. Production consolidates into a handful of hyper-advanced zones, controlled by megacorporations and aligned states. Inequality hardens. Opportunity narrows. The same technologies that could liberate instead enforce dependency. When this new order stabilizes, the deepest impacts are no longer economic. They are human. Work changes meaning. Routine dissolves. Identity detaches from profession and reattaches to adaptability, access, and relevance. A collective mentality begins to shift as people question not just how they earn a living, but why the system exists at all. Behind the scenes of this future, a truth becomes visible. Resilience is psychological as much as structural. Societies that adapt mentally survive faster than those that cling to nostalgia. This journey through impact, decisions, and transformation is only beginning. There is still a hidden layer to this timeline, one that reveals who truly benefits when systems break and who quietly pays the price. If this progression makes sense to you, write in the comments. That makes sense to me. As the timeline moves deeper into years 3 through 7, the initial shock hardens into strategy. What began as emergency reactions slowly transforms into long-term decisions that will define this era. Governments that once defended efficiency now prioritize survival. Western economies pour unprecedented subsidies into reshoring, automation, and domestic production, not because it's cheaper, but because dependence has become a visible risk. Economic nationalism shifts from rhetoric to doctrine, written into policy frameworks and long-term industrial plans. Central banks operate in a permanent state of intervention. Liquidity becomes a tool of stabilization, but also of control. Capital is guided, sometimes forced, into strategic sectors, semiconductors, energy infrastructure, logistics, and AI systems capable of managing complexity at scale. The language of markets changes. Resilience replaces growth as the dominant metric. Stability becomes more valuable than speed. Now, I want to go even deeper into what happens behind the scenes of this future. While states struggle with bureaucracy and political friction, megacorporations move with precision. Firms that control logistics networks, cloud infrastructure, data pipelines, and energy grids begin to detach from national dependency altogether. AI-driven supply chains evolve to predict disruption before it happens, rerouting production, labor, and resources in real time. These corporations don't wait for treaties. They build parallel systems. Power concentrates quietly, not through coups or collapse, but through capability. Governments still exist, but increasingly rely on private infrastructures they no longer fully control. Decisions that shape millions of lives are made inside boardrooms, guided by models optimized for continuity, not consensus. This is where the truth hidden beneath the disruption becomes clear. Sovereignty now belongs to those who control flow of goods, data, and energy. As the decade progresses, the global map begins to redraw itself. New blocks form, not based on ideology, but on technological alignment. Regions that master automation, and AI governance become hubs of influence. Others align themselves as satellites, trading autonomy for access. Globalization doesn't disappear. It fragments into controlled ecosystems, each with its own rules, currencies, and digital borders. The world enters a phase of structured fragmentation. From this fragmentation, two extreme outcomes emerge. In one path, automation unlocks an abundance economy. Productivity scales beyond human limitation, lowering costs and expanding access. Work evolves into coordination, creativity, and oversight. In the other path, concentration tightens. The same technologies amplify inequality, locking opportunity behind paywalls, credentials, and algorithmic relevance. The difference between these futures is not technology, it's governance. When this new order stabilizes, the deepest transformation is internal. People reassess their routines, their value, their purpose. Careers become temporary. Identity becomes fluid. A collective mentality forms around adaptability rather than loyalty. The journey through this era reshapes how societies define success, security, and meaning. Beneath the surface, a revelation takes shape. Systems don't just shape behavior, they shape belief. There is still one layer left to uncover in this timeline. One that reveals how control, dependence, and freedom truly rebalance when disruption becomes permanent. If you're following this journey, write in the comments, "I'm on this journey too." As the timeline advances into years 7 through 15, the world no longer reacts. It reorganizes. The initial chaos has settled into a new logic, and the global system begins to harden around fresh centers of gravity. With China no longer anchoring global manufacturing, an open race unfolds across Southeast Asia, India, and large parts of Africa. Industrial capacity migrates, but it does not replicate the past. It evolves. Factories are smaller, more automated, more dispersed, and deeply integrated with AI decision systems. In the early phase of this reconfiguration, nations compete aggressively for relevance. Incentives are offered, regulations rewritten, labor models restructured. But over time, it becomes clear that low cost alone is no longer decisive. Strategic advantage now belongs to economies that master AI orchestration, predictive logistics, autonomous production, and energy optimization. These systems don't just reduce friction, they reshape power. Countries that fail to integrate into this new architecture find themselves structurally sidelined, regardless of population or resources. Now, I want to go even deeper into this future. As these shifts compound, the world bifurcates. On one side, closed sovereign systems emerge, tightly regulated economies prioritizing control, internal stability, and political autonomy. On the other, hyper-networked AI trade zones take form, operating across borders with shared standards, interoperable data layers, and algorithmic governance. These zones move faster than traditional states, adapting in real time to shocks and opportunities. Globalization doesn't disappear here. It mutates into something more selective, more conditional, and far less universal. Along this path, two extreme economic realities crystallize. In one version of the future, abundance takes hold. Automation scales beyond scarcity. Production becomes adaptive, and access to goods stabilizes across regions. Human labor shifts toward design, strategy, and meaning-driven roles. In the parallel outcome, concentration dominates. Control over AI infrastructure, data, and energy narrows into the hands of a few powerful blocs. Opportunity becomes gated. Mobility slows. The same tools that could democratize prosperity instead entrench hierarchy. When this new order stabilizes, the most profound impact is not visible on balance sheets. It unfolds inside daily life. Routines fragment. Long-term careers dissolve into adaptive phases. Identity detaches from profession and reattaches to relevance within systems that are always changing. A collective mentality forms around continuous adjustment, where security is psychological as much as material. The journey through this era forces societies to confront a quiet truth. Stability was never guaranteed. It was borrowed from a system that no longer exists. Behind the scenes of this future, deeper revelations begin to surface about who sets the rules, about who benefits from complexity, and about what freedom means when choice itself is shaped by invisible systems. If this vision resonates with you, write in the comments, That makes sense to me. As this timeline stretches further into the future, the accumulated decisions of the previous decade begin to lock the world into direction. What once felt fluid now starts to crystallize. The early impacts, the emergency responses, the reconfiguration power, all of it converges into two radically different outcomes. Both are born from the same technologies, the same shocks, and the same departure of China from the center of the system. The divergence is not technological. It is structural. In the first extreme future, automation accelerates beyond crisis management and becomes a foundation for renewal. Manufacturing is rebuilt outside its former core, but this time designed for resilience rather than volume. AI systems coordinate decentralized factories across regions, balancing supply and demand with precision. Prices stabilize. Scarcity fades. Production becomes modular, local, and adaptive. Power disperses because no single node is indispensable anymore. This is a post-scarcity trajectory, not utopian but functional. The global economy, what a scenario here produces abundance through redundancy and stability through decentralization. Now I want to go even deeper into the alternative path. In the second future, efficiency wins over resilience. Production consolidates into a handful of AI-controlled megaregions where energy, data, and logistics converge. These zones outperform everything else. Costs drop, output soars, but access narrows. Nations become dependent on systems they do not govern. Megacorporations evolve into infrastructural authorities, shaping trade, labor, and even monetary flows. Inequality hardens into architecture. The global economy functions, but only for those inside the system. As years pass and this order stabilizes, the impact moves inward. Societies adapt to very different realities depending on which future they inhabit. In the abundance path, routine changes slowly. Work shifts toward coordination, creativity, and stewardship. People measure value less by productivity and more by contribution. In the concentration path, identity becomes conditional. Careers fragment. Relevance depends on alignment with dominant systems. A collective mentality forms around competition for access rather than creation of value. Across both futures, a shared transformation unfolds. The old promise of globalization, progress through integration, is replaced by a quieter truth. Systems shape choices long before individuals make them. Behind the scenes of this future, the real power lies not in governments or markets alone, but in the design of the platforms that mediate reality itself. This revelation forces a reckoning with purpose. What does freedom mean when options are optimized for you? What does security mean when stability is conditional? This journey through extremes reveals something deeper still, something unresolved. Because beneath abundance and concentration lies another layer of this timeline, one that exposes how control, dependency, and human agency finally rebalance. If this resonates, write in the comments. I'm on this journey too. As this alternate timeline reaches maturity, the most profound shifts are no longer measured in output, trade volumes, or GDP. They unfold quietly inside daily life. When this new order stabilizes, work is no longer defined by physical labor or even by traditional skills. It becomes a question of system access, algorithmic relevance, and digital sovereignty. Being productive matters less than being connected to the right platforms, fluent in their logic, and visible to their decision-making systems. In the early years, people try to adapt using old frameworks. They reskill, relocate, renegotiate their place inside the economy. But over time, a deeper transformation takes hold. Careers fragment into phases. Stability becomes temporary by design. Identity detaches from profession and reattaches to adaptability. The impact of this shift is subtle but relentless, reshaping how individuals define success, value, and belonging. Now I want to go even deeper into this scenario. As societies internalize these changes, a collective questioning begins. Globalization, once seen as inevitable progress, is re-examined. Dependence is no longer abstract. It's personal. People recognize how much of their agency is mediated by systems they neither own nor fully understand. Economic freedom starts to feel conditional, shaped by access rather than choice. This realization spreads quietly, altering cultural narratives about ambition, security, and self-worth. Along this journey, the mentalidad colectiva evolves. In some regions, cooperation strengthens as communities rebuild local resilience and shared purpose. In others, competition intensifies, driven by fear of exclusion from dominant systems. The truth hidden beneath this divergence is uncomfortable. Technology did not remove uncertainty. It redistributed it. And those least equipped to navigate complexity feel the weight of that transformation first. Behind the scenes of this future, the meaning of security is rewritten. It is no longer guaranteed by employment, nationality, or even wealth, but by relevance within constantly updating systems. Progress itself becomes ambiguous. Faster no longer means better. More no longer means safer. A revelation emerges from this tension. When systems become intelligent, humans must decide what intelligence is for. This is not the end of the story. It is the threshold. Because once society fully adapts to this reality, a final question surfaces, one about control, autonomy, and the long-term cost of optimization. That question has not yet been answered in this timeline. If this reflection resonates with you, write in the comments. That makes sense to me. As this alternate timeline approaches its most revealing phase, the meaning of what happened becomes impossible to ignore. China closing its borders was never just an economic event. It was a stress test for a civilization built on invisible connections. In the early years, the damage looked logistical. Factories offline, prices rising, jobs disappearing. But as time passed, it became clear that the true impact was structural. The world had optimized for interdependence without preparing for its failure. Over the years, governments believed they were restoring control through policy. Banks believed they were stabilizing systems through intervention, and megacorporations believed they were solving inefficiency through AI. Each decision felt rational in isolation. Together, they quietly rewired the architecture of the global economy. Power drifted away from borders and into systems. Resilience replaced growth as a guiding principle. But resilience came with trade-offs that few fully understood at the time. Now I want to go even deeper into the meaning of this shift. As new blocks formed and extreme futures took shape, humanity was forced into a collective journey of reevaluation. The abundance path promised stability through decentralization, yet demanded trust in technology. The concentration path promised efficiency through scale, yet required surrendering autonomy. Neither future was chosen outright. They emerged from accumulated decisions, made under pressure, often without full visibility of long-term consequences. When this new order stabilizes, the revelation is uncomfortable. Control no longer sits where people expect it. Borders still exist, currencies still trade, governments still speak. But the true leverage lies in whoever designs, owns, and governs the systems beneath daily life. The fragility exposed by isolation becomes a permanent feature of awareness. Progress is no longer assumed. It is questioned. The mentalidad colectiva shifts from optimism to vigilance. This is the hidden truth behind this timeline. Interconnection was never the problem. Blind dependence was. And once that truth surfaces, the future stops being about reopening borders or restoring trade. It becomes about redesigning the foundations of cooperation, resilience, and agency in a world where disruption is no longer an exception, but a constant. The path forward is still unresolved. Multiple futures remain viable. And the most important decisions in this timeline have not yet been made, because they depend not on technology or policy alone, but on how societies choose to define freedom, security, and control in the age of permanent interdependence. If this question stays with you, write in the comments. I'm on this journey too. If you made it this far, it tells me something important. It tells me that these questions about alternate economies, future predictions, and global economic what-if scenarios matter to you. This channel exists for exactly that purpose, to slow things down, to simulate different futures, and to explore how decision systems and power might reshape the world we live in. If this journey through an alternate timeline challenged the way you see the global economy, consider subscribing, not as a habit, but as a way to stay connected to deeper simulations like this one, where we examine uncertainty, resilience, and the forces quietly shaping what comes next. You can also leave a comment letting me know you've reached the end. Just right, this future really made me think. Those small signals help build a community of people who want to understand these possibilities not just react to headlines. And if this analysis added value, a like helps this kind of content reach others who are also questioning how the future might unfold. There's another simulation right here that connects directly with this one. Click and keep going with me there, because this timeline doesn't end here, it branches.